So for today's episode, we are going to be discussing immersion. And you didn't happen to bring that thing you had with the pages and the words and
The dictionary?
dictionary, right? Oh my God, why did that take so long? We don't have it. So what would you say is your definition of immersion?
I would say, well, as someone who was working in film for a while, I'd say my best definition of immersion would be suspension of disbelief. When the viewer or player or whatever you want to call them, the consumer of the media ceases to process the fact that they are in a theater or in their house or holding a controller or anything like that, and even if they still know they're playing a video game, they're no longer consciously acknowledging that fact. They're no longer consciously acknowledging they're sitting in a chair. They're just so absorbed with the thing that they just, again, they suspend their disbelief that what is happening in front of them is not actually true.
Okay. And let's say you're a developer and you're considering all these different avenues of designing a game. You got to look after your mechanics, you got to look after your story, you got to look after your graphics, your visuals, your sound. How important would you say immersion is in designing a game? And does it depend on the kind of game? Because I think in some way immersion needs to at least be a factor for all different kinds of games, but they have different kinds of immersion.
Well, I think level of immersion is something that happens with everything. Like, I can put on a CD with music, lie down in my bed, and become immersed in the music if I want to. But, types of immersion is definitely, I think, something to point out. I personally file immersion, especially in video games, under two different categories. You have the world immersion, or the story immersion, or let's just call it world immersion. Let's keep it simple.
Yeah, the one that was probably a little bit closer to other forms of media where you're paying attention to the proceedings, the story, the characters.
Yes, you are adamantly thinking about the effect you have on this world, about what's going on, the interests of other players, and as we approach more open-ended games, stuff like Witcher, Dishonored, some of the earlier Dragon Ages, like games like that, we really step into this because it's an action consequence thing. Telltale does a fantastic job of these with their Walking Dead games and the
Wolf Within?
Wolf Within, thank you. I was about to call it something.
Called Cry Wolf.
Yeah. Well,
that's not a bad name for it, although that one's probably designed by Crytek.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Oh, I just got that joke. But...
What joke?
Well,
I know. Go ahead.
But, that's the world immersion. And the other type of immersion, which I think not a lot of people acknowledge, and to which Nintendo is a master of, is sort of the synesthesia immersion. The idea that...
I'm sorry, I still don't know if that's the right word for it.
It's not the right
word.
word.
Even a word at all?
No, synesthesia is a word, but I'm probably using it absolutely correct. Let's call it...
Well, when we were discussing...
Let's call it adrenaline.
Okay.
No, the adrenaline.
When we were discussing this prior to filming, the term that I wanted to offer was Zen immersion.
You know what? Actually, the more I think about that, that actually makes more... Because normally people think Zen, they think, a state of being calm, a state of... Whatever,
but there is a level of calmness to not thinking about anything else but what's going on.
Yeah.
It's that total attentive focus. There's no distractions or anything.
Yeah, Zen is more of a state of mind than the state... Like, it is more of a state of mind or a level of mind than it is a specific place. So... Yeah, let's go with Zen immersion. I like that one. I like that one more every time I say it.
A website that I had read quite actively a few years ago that's still on is Serlin.net. David Serlin is a game developer. Don't give me that look.
I
don't have to know everything.
Hmm?
You don't have to know everything.
Yeah, good point.
You know most things.
Hmm.
Gives the rest of us a break. But he when he was discussing Zen in a competitive play, he was referring to the relationship between a pitcher and a batter in a game of baseball. Now, to us watching it, that ball is going pretty fast. Not bolt fast, but still fast. And somehow the baseball player is able to not only swing, but in 3 tries, connect the bat with the ball in a way that gets that ball really far. And the batter is using Zen at this moment because he is so focused on what's happening that he's actually managing to not slow time down, but control his own perception of time. So that the ball feels like it's coming no faster than it possibly could come. And then, I'm sorry, no look is almost as off-putting as having a look. Yeah, okay, that'll do. Now I can see your reflection in the door. But then he was referring to what would happen in a game of Street Fighter. It's not the same thing as a baseball game, but he is still predicting the enemy because there is still a relationship between him and his opponent, and he's trying to get a feel for what move he's about to do. And even though it takes place in a few very short frames, he can still use his Zen to at least have the best possible response time. So that's just why I wanted to use the word Zen for this.
Yeah, and then that's absolutely fantastic. I've actually, I think, had similar moments. I used to play a lot of dodgeball in high school, and you could see a ball coming at you. You could know how far it's traveled in a half second, and then you can just mentally jump it forward half seconds to determine, okay, when you should be moving your hands. When, I've hit those moments, and it's amazing because you feel like you're outthinking the ball, and then it's like, ha! But, so if we want to go just sort of start one, the main thing you want to do with, I think, video games in general, but especially if you want to aim for story immersion, is you have to know what your rules are and stick to it. Actually, an example that just occurred to me, in Dark Souls, because we don't talk about Demon Souls anymore, in Dark Souls, if you could see an enemy, you could shoot it. If you could stand on top of a tower and see, there's something off in the distance, you could go to it. It was a game that, again, it had a very iron set of rules and it stuck to them. The whole see it, you can shoot it is a fantastic example because, I'm in this whatever particular vantage place, I can see this guy in the other tower. There's no magic invisible wall that prevents your arrow from hitting it. Every enemy, this is what they can do. Maybe this is very overpowered, but these are still all obeying the rules of the universe. And that, even when it gets challenging, even when it gets really hard, it doesn't really feel like the game designers are punishing you or hurting you because they're maintaining the rules of the universe. And that's actually one of the reasons why I find, just as more example of story immersion, Dishonored, a very immersive world. It's very well designed. It keeps with the level of technology very faithfully. And it creates a world with characters you care about it, but you as the main character of Dishonored, you don't obey the rules of that world. Before you ever get locked up, whatever, you hear whispers of the Outsider, and even afterwards you hear about cults of the Outsider. Very early on in the game, the Outsider selects you. He declares, okay, you will now bear my mark. And with it, supernatural powers beyond other people's kins. You can summon plague rats, you can blink, you can do all these things. You can essentially break the rules of the universe. But the Outsider gave you those powers, and the Outsider is technically part of that universe. So it creates this amazing feeling where you're both part of the universe because you were born into it, and the technology is everywhere, and everyone uses pistols, and everything follows these consistent rules.
Yeah.
But then you can break the rules.
In a sense, in order for something to actually happen in the game, there needs to be some breaking of at least the defined conventions of this world. Because if you don't get those powers, the game ceases to exist. It's now nothing could happen.
Why do we care about you versus this guy over here? In fact, I think that's one of the stages from the hero's journey. The gathering of the sword or something like that. It's get the call, refusing the call, beginning the journey, trial of the... I should look that up for specific words. But there actually is a part of the 15 stages of a story where you're granted some item that singles you out against anyone else.
Yeah, well, you can just name other protagonists. Luke Skywalker gets a lightsaber. Harry Potter gets his wand, the wand of which turns out to have significance later on in the story. It's definitely a convention, but I can't think of it off the top of my head either. And there's always a level of excusability at least with the protagonist's ability to break the rules and be able to do more than what other people can do. And it's even in the simplest ways. Even in Super Mario Brothers, you get 3 tries before you either get game over or hope you've accumulated another 1-up. That's already one thing that is an established breaking of the rules, because if a Goomba gets stomped, that Goomba doesn't get to blink in and give it another shot. No, that Goomba, he's dead. Even in action movies, there's always that joke where the enemy minions are terrible shots.
Stormtrooper effect.
Yeah, they can't. Well, my theory with the Stormtroopers, at least, is that a lot of the Stormtroopers were formerly loyal to the Republic. And so because they don't want to actually serve the Emperor, they're just deliberately shooting off all over the place. If you're like, we're not shooting you as much as we not can, so can you just get out of here already, Luke? But yeah, I mean that's just an example of one particular group of poor shots. But it comes up in action movies all the time. The guy, if the guy gets shot, he only gets shot in places where he's not going to take lethal damage. He gets wounded in the shoulder, or he takes a shot in the thigh.
Or if it does hit him in the torso, it just cleanly goes all the way through without taking any real pieces of meat with it.
Or he just gets shot and is like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine. No big deal.
Mm.
Yeah, I just got shot in the mouth. It's okay. I'm talking perfectly fine. And we all laugh at it, but without that, there'd be no movie. So the question is the movie or the game still worth doing if the rules are being broken?
Well, I guess it would really... Well, worth doing it, I guess, is a little silly. I mean, there's lots of games out there, which actually we'll come to with the Zen examples later, but they're still fun. Like, I think the question is how they're doing it. Mm. I mean, we can look at something, Metal Gear Rising. The punishment you take during a lot of the cutscenes is a bit ridiculous, but we established in the game that most enemies have these little repair nanites in them. And in fact, that's them poking fun at modern military shooters, because these repair nanites cause the enemies to slowly regain health over time. Mm. And the idea is you actually cut them right out of the body, grab them, crush them, and absorb them to heal yourself massively. So, in that universe, you have the ability to, again, heal yourself instantly as long as you grab a hold of one of these things. So, the idea of you getting back up after a cutscene is feasible if they put more of these things in your hand somehow, but it creates a reason there why you're able to do things that in other video games they wouldn't bother to explain.
Yeah.
So, that's an example. If you have an action game where, again, you're getting shot a lot, then spontaneously a fight breaks out, or better than an action game, an RPG, where you spend the mini cutscene getting your ass kicked by the boss, then spontaneously you start the fight, and you now are at full health and all that stuff. There's really no explanation there. Like, Rising had a bit of an explanation, even if they didn't stick to it as much as they should have, and whereas the RPGs don't. In fact, there's lots of examples of RPGs where... Why didn't the Phoenix Down work? Why didn't the Phoenix Down work? We actually have to put this up.
No, you timed it. I'm sorry, by the way, if that's not the correct spelling of Aerith. I looked it up. It's all I can do.
It's been many years. None of us have memorized how to spell the name. But, that would be an example, again, of not obeying its own rules. Like, if they would have to... They spent no time whatsoever trying to establish why this death was different than another death. Like, why is it that when Sephiroth's dead, like, if we'd established Sephiroth's sword is made out of something in relation to the Genova material, then maybe that would explain why he can permanently kill people. Because let's face it, you don't fight him again until the end of the game. So
it's also possible that Phoenix Downs only work if somebody has been KO'd, and so when you're in a fight, no one ever dies. They only ever get KO'd.
Yeah, well, I always thought that's just kind of the excuse for, you can have half your party die and they don't just permanently die. It's not Fire Emblem where they permanently die, but that, again, is a bit of an example of breaking its rules. It's creating a very tense, sorrowful moment, which then has a lot of people, turning the game off, scratching their head, saying, why can't I just Phoenix Down them? I mean, the very definition of Phoenix Down is to have your body go to ash and then rise again anew.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So what was, so do you want to move on from World Immersion, or do you want to talk about the other one?
I want you to do your World of Warcraft example. This is something I've heard from every World of Warcraft player at all. Take it away.
Okay, I wasn't expecting to do it right at this moment. I wanted you to do your examples first. This is fine. So, what I wanted to compare is World of Warcraft pre-Burning Crusade, or vanilla World of Warcraft, versus the second iteration of Guild Wars, also known as Guild Wars 2.
I would like to just mention, I did try World of Warcraft a while ago for the 2-week free demo. I really couldn't get into it. I really didn't like it, but the thing everyone keeps telling me is back when World of Warcraft was vanilla, it was a completely different, far superior experience. So this is the golden age that apparently I was not a part of.
There are some reasons why vanilla World of Warcraft worked, and I can only say what I loved about it, and for me, it was the conflict between the Alliance and the Horde. And if you were to join a player versus environment server, you could only engage in combat with the Horde or the Alliance, depending on what side you're on. I'm just going to say Horde because I usually play Alliance. If you had marked yourself for combat and you were in a contested zone, of which most of the zones were contested once you get past the starter areas.
The crossroads are under attack. The crossroads are under attack. The crossroads are under attack.
And usually when the crossroads were under attack, it was by its own people. But in that, if you came across a member of the Horde who didn't want to fight, he didn't have to. All right, fine. He just has quests he wants to do. He doesn't care about fighting the Alliance. I'll see him in hell. But in a player versus player server, with the exception of the starter zones, which are either Alliance or Horde territory, if you see someone on the enemy side, you can fight them. And it was great because depending on what level you were, the fighting played out differently. There's obviously the best kinds of fights are the level 60s because they've got all the powers, they've got the best gear they can get their hands on.
They got all the powers, and then they get all the monies, and then they get all the women's.
Yeah, they're probably going to stop at the second one. But when you say you were level 35 and you came across enemies on level 35 or maybe a little bit above, maybe a little bit below, it was a different kind of fight and it felt more like a scrap. And it felt more like you were pulling off everything that you had just to live. Like there would be times where I'm facing 2 against 1, and I make a run for it, and I hide, and I apply a bandage, which has like a minute cooldown, and I pop a potion, and I actually sit down and start eating dinner and drinking just to like try to get my health back up before they catch me, and it gets back into it, and it's great. But that's not why. That was part of the immersion because Warcraft is a franchise that was always built around conflict, and so it was great to see that conflict being played out by the players and against each other.
Well, in any MMO or any video game in general, your greatest enemy will always be other players. That's why I really think is a huge emphasis on multiplayer focus games these days, because you're never going to create a better pilot AI to fight against than another human being.
Yeah.
Because they will think in ways that a computer has yet to be able to achieve. And, as soon as they do achieve, we'll have Skynet problems and all that jazz.
I'm sure Skynet would just want to play with us and not actually want to kill us. Of course, the consequence to losing will be death. So it's kind of fair. But it's also great because you would like to have something to hate when you're playing this game. Instead of having to hate your own allies or hating somebody from another country, you have people on the other side of the game that you have every right to hate and every right to want to murder as many times as you can. And it's an outlet for aggression, which is part of why video games contribute to the reduction of violence in society. So, what made World of Warcraft immersive, and why Guild Wars 2 isn't immersive? It's a matter of how much confidence you have in your presentation and how much you're willing to pander to your players. And I think Guild Wars 2 is a great game. Artistically, it's beautiful, and I thought the combat was solid. Although I haven't played it in a while, and people have a lot of complaints about the combat. For me, I never had a problem with it, but then I did play Guardian, so I was on the higher end of the power spectrum, apparently. I think
Guardian is very strange in it that they're a tank with very little natural health. So you spend the first half of your leveling pretty...
I don't know, I did okay. You have a self-heal, though, but you're right, they're not the tankiest. One of the things that I enjoy about an MMO is when you're leveling up, you're running around, and you're interacting with other people just by random happenstance. And in Guild Wars 2, a lot of that running around was sacrificed in order to convenience the player because you have all these waypoints.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem with waypoints is that, yes, you get things done faster, but then you also get things done faster. And because you're always moving from the high energy or high active moments, from moment to moment to moment, and you don't get as much downtime, you don't have as much investment in your character, which is important on an MMORPG because you're spending a lot of time with these characters and you actually want to give a damn about them. Well, Warcraft, on the other hand, I think is Blizzard at its most confident I've ever seen them, and probably the most confident I'll ever see them ever again, because they weren't afraid to inconvenience a player in some small ways, so long as there was some payoff for it. And one great example of this is when you are going to take a griffin path from a new location to a previously visited location, you would have to mount the griffin, or a wyvern, or whatever, and the griffin would rise into the air, and it would fly from one side of the world to the other. And the first couple times you do that, you're kind of like amazed because you've never seen anyone do that before. Especially, I don't know about if I've ever seen that in an RPG, but for people who maybe never played an MMO before, this is just great.
It emphasized just how interconnected the whole world was. Like, hey, this isn't a bunch of tiny pocket instances. No. This is a whole world.
And it isn't just a visual thing. It isn't just an impressive thing. It's also a gameplay mechanic, because if your griffin is covering territory you haven't even visited yet, it serves as kind of foreshadowing for where you'll end up visiting later on. Like to fly from the dwarven area to the human area, if you don't take the subway, there's a subway between the two.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah, you can fly over, and you'll go over this volcanic territory, and it's like, you're not going to be going here until much later, but here's a glimpse, here's what it's going to look like, here's something to look forward to. And after the 50th time you've done that, it's kind of annoying to still have to get on the griffin and fly every time. By the latter end of the game, you probably have access to a mage who will just teleport you to the capital cities. You'll have a mount so that you can ride around on your own much faster. But at least when you're flying over, Blizzard is giving you an opportunity or an excuse to not play the game for a few moments. Do push-ups or something while you're waiting.
Get another glass of water, or go to the bathroom to empty all the glass of water you got. Something I keep needing to ask, though, every time I hear about these griffins. Could you actually pass by other griffins?
Well, kind of. I mean,
like, could you actually, say your guildmate and time 2 flights from the opposite locations?
They all fly on a set path, and I think I might have seen them do that. I can't remember exactly. That is a good question. But usually when like I would take off and then somebody else would take off almost within the same span of time, they would sort of disappear and load out, and they didn't want to process that information, because I think if they were loading all those people, you would just have these strings of griffins. Or they're like, all right, so we need to 7U, so the griffins are going to be flying in V formation, and the griffins are all graceful.
I just imagine it'd be a hilarious thing if they had 2 griffins flying along, like on the same path, and then hit each other, and then now they're flying, but they're carrying their passenger in their talons the rest of the way.
Or if there's it's a contested air zone, so the wyverns are coming from one side and the griffins are coming from another, and you have to joust them. The loser has to fall into the volcano. Now
I'm sure you feel silly for going away and getting more water.
Oh, what? Yeah. Well, it's not a missed opportunity. That's just, but that.
Oh yeah, that'd be just silliness for the sake of it.
So, I can see an impatient player, or just a player who, I mean, you are paying to play this game, so the downtime is somewhat of a hindrance. But I can see them complaining about that. But the thing for me is always, the most important thing about an MMORPG is creating a believable working game environment. It doesn't have to be a simulation of the real world, but it has to be a world that abides by its own rules. And all the characters in the world follow those rules, and then you as a player still felt like you were somewhat on the same page as these characters, even if you might be more powerful or less powerful depending on your level. The thing I had about Guild Wars 2 is this strange disconnect with the game, because I'm really just moving around as a player using my avatar to carry out my will, and he's just the accumulator of my wealth and power, and he's not really an extension of me as a player. There are role-playing servers where you can just be completely in character, and it goes a lot better in that. And I don't want to not recommend Guild Wars 2, but I'm recommending Guild Wars 2 over World of Warcraft because the vanilla World of Warcraft doesn't exist. So,
well, I think, as we sort of said before, Guild Wars 2, for all its strengths, is also very video gamey. It's like the wardrobe system makes perfect sense, but it's very video gamey. The weapon system simplifies a lot of things, and again, it makes sense, but it also kind of restricts, like, why is it that I can only carry 3 utility spells when I know all these utility spells? Why isn't this utility spell technically considered a glamour one? It acts so much like these other spells, like they're glamour. Yada, yada, yada. It's a good game. I like it. Don't recommend it. But it's very video gamey. It's hard to get. It's not impossible. Like there's lots of role playing. Like not many, not say servers, but you'll have guilds that do it, and they'll actually rent out their own arenas, and they'll declare these parts of these towns are basically where they'll gather, and they'll all keep in character. They all bind. So it's possible, but there is an initial disconnect. It does make many video game conveniences for the characters.
Yeah. Okay, so what about this Zen immersion that we keep bringing up?
Well, Zen Immersion, I think I've got two major examples, one of which I know you're going to jump on and love, and so I'm going to get the first one out of the way. The first one I really have to say is Metal Gear Rising. It's a game that...
You talked about that.
Well, yes, but now we're sort of actually going on... I'm going to make my point now.
Okay.
It's a game that, again, it consists of its own rules, and if you listen to the plot, like a lot of people said the plot in Rising was stupid, it's no more stupid than any other Metal Gear Solid game. Let's be honest, those things were convoluted to begin with. It's a game that you can really get into it because the whole thing is about forward momentum. You hold down one button, you now dash at high speeds, and you automatically deflect bullets. You deflect enemy melee attacks by pushing forward and light attack. It's a game that really solidifies you on forward momentum, and I was playing that and on normal mode, hard mode, like even really hard mode, it just felt so satisfying at the end of a boss battle to just go into the free cut mode and just slice them to pieces. Like everything about it felt good, and I got absorbed into the game. In fact, I had to actively put it down after beating hard mode because I realized I just powered straight through normal, straight to hard, and straight through the challenge modes and yada yada, because it felt really good. Like, obviously I wasn't invested in the characters or anything like that because they're all very weirdly written, but the game just felt good to play. And because of it, I reached a point where my brain would think, attack, instead of think attack, therefore move thumb, therefore push button, I just thought attack, my thumb moved on its own. And that really is, I think, the epitome of Zen Immersion, where you forget there's a controller in your hand and almost start instinctively moving the character. And the next example, which is probably the stronger example, would be Smash Brothers. In what story environment would you ever have an electricity-wielding rodent fighting a cybernetic wolf furry? Actually, yeah, we can say Star Wolf. Cybernetic wolf furry on top of a spaceship, somehow going through an asteroid field, flying into an atmosphere, going around on a planet, warping back out into space without the two people falling off? The answer? Who gives a fuck? Fire and laser, get over there. Quick attack behind you. Grab the sword, throw the foes right at him. And I jump over. Lightning gets out in the field. Do a dance, do a dance, do a dance, do a dance.
That's an example of the custom mode where you can play on fast. Right? Yeah.
No, that's actually a speed the game can go at if you know what you're doing. But it comes down to, I've seen lots of people play Smash Brothers, and you just get completely absorbed in it. And even as people are next to you, and you're like, ah, God, and you dance for them on the screen, and you're doing all this fun stuff, and it's not until you really hit the screen and you have everyone like first, second place and everyone's applauding. That's something I really like about the Smash Brothers franchise. Like even the people who lost are standing there like, good job first place or good job. Like I'm not going to hold anything against you. And you really just hit the point where you forget you're playing a video game. And a lot of fighting games can actually get like that. I think Smash Brothers is the best example because it's really simple. One button is your standard attacks, one button is your special attacks, and then it's simply down, forward, etc. Like, I like BlazBlue Chrono Phantasm. I think it's a fantastic fighting game. I think they've really refined the vision they wanted to go for in the third game and, nailed it down. But at the same time, there's a difference between chrono rotate forward special move, and then now I have to, full half circle, special move. I didn't do the half circles fast enough, so I didn't execute the right special move. Like, that can get a lot more mathy and a lot more complicated. It's still a good game, but I'm not really getting into it the same way I would with just playing forward special move.
Yeah, and I think one of the problems with entering these key codes to do a special move is that the button configuration combination has to at least make some sense as to why it corresponds with that move.
If you start firing projectiles using the light attack button, that's just weird.
Yeah. One of the funny things about you were mentioning about the way that you've thinking about the fact that you're holding a controller, you just continue playing it, is one of the problems with the motion control phenomenon. And I'm being critical of the Wii here. Is that 90% of the time the Wiimote worked fine, and I wasn't thinking about the fact that I was holding the Wiimote, but because it wasn't perfectly designed, and because there was room for error, like you would suddenly your signal would be disconnected, or your bounding box would be off, or you
Let go of it and it smashed into the screen.
or let go of it and it smashes into the screen. We regret not filming that. It happened to us. It wasn't a screen; it was a closet door, but it was still pretty funny. Because I knew it was going to happen because they were talking about how the cords were so thin. But that's off topic.
My friend's dad did that with the bowling minigame. Like, ready?
Yeah.
Red.
Yeah.
Oops.
For us, it was the baseball pitch. But off topic. So as great as it works when it works, because there is those moments where it's not responding properly, that is full immersion breaking. Because you stop thinking about holding this controller, you stop thinking about the game, you start thinking about the way that this controller is now actively hindering you from continuing to play.
I think what the Wii had two options. It had a full one-to-one motion option, which is always going to be ridiculous. Let's say I'm sword fighting you, and I swing the Wiimote. The thing is, the Wiimote doesn't actually have a blade on top of it. The blade isn't actually connecting with yours. So my arm does this, whereas the animation might actually do this because you deflected it. So,
and it's not like I thought it'd be really cool if there was a rumble feedback that was so strong it actually did rumble enough to kind of make you stop swinging, or at least to impede you. But that would drain the battery incredibly fast, so I didn't see it being feasible.
Well, the other path they could have gotten was to, and a lot of people are going to say they did do this, which I don't really think, they're not doing it the way I'm describing it, is to use the Wiimote more as a suggestion. So, back to the sword swing example, let's say I swing the sword up here. The game registers I've swung the sword up here, and therefore my character does an overhead attack. Let's say I swing the sword over here. Like, the game isn't trying to match my exact angle, instead it's just registering overhead attack, side attack, uppercut. Like, to use them as, again, suggestive. And a lot of people are going to say it did do that, but I think that's more examples of them trying to do one-to-one and failing, as opposed to actually saying everything here is the same overhead.
Well, there was a third element where the gesture of the Wiimote was kind of like its own button. So in order to, say, draw the Zorro logo on somebody and make her clothes fall off, you would have to do...
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, don't you remember The Mask of Zorro? He did that to, I think, Selma Hayek.
Yeah, so there was a Zorro game, and you could Zorro people.
No, I'm just thinking of a symbol where a guy has to draw something. Anyways, let's just say he's doing that. You would have to, in the development phase, you would have to say, okay, in order for him to do this gesture, he has to do this. Do, zip. And then if the player doesn't do that motion, then it doesn't happen on screen. So it was a way of having a lot of different moves and gestures that replaced the buttons, but it didn't necessarily improve on the lack of buttons. Because if you had a controller with a bunch of buttons, you can just get it all done anyways.
I mean, that's one of the main reasons I think real-time strategy games and even turn-based strategy games, well, mostly real, will only ever work on the PC. Because you can't have these units shortcutting this same ability. Like, if you have your Marines and then you have your cloaking invisible people, you can't have the Marines' Hellfire rounds be the same shortcut button as your invisible people's cloaking power.
Yeah.
Because then you can have a bunch of Marines run toward, like, you're trying to micromanage all these things at once. So you kind of need the keyboard because you need to cycle and do all that. And then, you're getting a bit off topic. But that is something you need a ton of buttons for. It's just unavoidable.
Yeah. The best use of the Wiimote was always with the nunchuck, because the nunchuck allowed you to move a character using an analog stick. Super Mario Galaxy is a perfect game with that Wiimote and with that nunchuck, because it's integrated knowing that they're going to be using this Wiimote, and it's not used as a replacement for something else. It's used as a part of the gameplay. You would just very casually move the star around the screen, pick up the star bits, shoot them at things if you wanted to shoot them, and then most of the controls were what you were used to. It's kind of back what we were talking about in the Nintendo episode, taking something that they know, and then adding in something that they're trying, and actually doing it right. Okay, so With gameplay immersion or Zen immersion, there was another example that I'd like to use. A surprise here at Zelda, Ocarina of Time versus Skyward Sword. Now, I know you didn't play Skyward Sword. I don't know if you didn't play Ocarina of Time.
Please, I have to get out my gamer card. Yes, I played Ocarina of Time. Both versions, actually.
All right, because I was going to have to...
And I know most of the Ocarina of Time songs on the flute in Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, a lot of people were trying to play Zelda music at Fan Expo. A lot of people were selling ocarinas. I didn't buy one. Could have. Didn't have the money. Anyways, it was next year. So, in Ocarina of Time, there are plenty of puzzles, many of which involve pushing a block or shooting something in the face with a sharp object. But there's also puzzles or problems that are involving other characters. There's the classic fat Zora King sitting in his, I guess, kind of throne river thing where he's blocking the path to the fountain. And he's so absorbed in his own missing daughter that he's not even acknowledging that you're here. So that becomes a puzzle, except that it's just not one that involves a physical pushing of a block.
You're not trying to look around for the nearby key card the developers didn't, find.
No, you don't kill all the Zoras in the room for him to move out of the way.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out, all right, well, how do I find his daughter? And then you run around, you talk to people, you end up figuring out how to do it, and you end up having to, in order to get into the fish, you have to, the giant Jabu Jabu, you have to pick up a small fish, put it in front of him, he opens up his mouth, and he sucks you in, and that's the third dungeon. It's a creative way of not only presenting you with a puzzle, but doing one that makes this world feel more like it was designed to facilitate puzzle-solving gameplay, and that these characters aren't standing in the way of puzzle solving, they actually become puzzles. And that is part of what makes that particular Zelda game one of the best ones. Skyward Sword, on the other hand, to my recollection, I couldn't think of very many puzzles that involved helping a character, at least not in the main plot. Most of what would involve Skyward Sword is, in order to get through this door, you had to assemble a key, and to find the key, you had to pick up all 5 fragments of said key, and in order to find each fragment, you had to point your Wiimote and start dowsing, where it would, the noise would get louder if you were pointing in the right direction of the key fragment.
That sounds like it would get old really quickly.
Well, getting to each fragment was at least enjoyable because the gameplay was focusing on the adventurous nature of Zelda. So there was a lot of tightrope walking, a lot of making jumps, a lot of combat, and that was fun. But yeah, it does get old. You keep picking up fragments, and they're not finding new creative ways to get you to solve a problem. And that's why Ocarina of Time is definitely more immersive, but in a way that helps the gameplay, not just the story. And I'm done.
Alright. Well, I think we covered the main major examples of the two things. I think another thing I like about Ocarina of Time, and I'm also a huge fan of Link to the Past, but the thing with Link to the Past is that I guess the combat and the puzzle jumping, solving, etc. were very integrated. Like each could happen at any given moment, at any given time, simultaneously. Yeah. Whereas Ocarina, I think, did a bit better job with the pacing. I mean, yes, it was a little more unrealistic. Like, the Z targeting basically means, oh, I'm no longer jumping on platforms. I am now focused on this guy, and I should kill him!
Yeah.
And he'll die. But it did do, I think... For me, I like the pacing on that a lot more, because it created an environment where this is, everything is attuned here for me to solve this puzzle. And then even in real life, like if you're fighting someone, you're concentrating on them. You're not viewing the entire room from a top-down view and thinking about all these things. You're concentrating on them. You're trying to defeat them. That's what you're focused on. And it did a very nice way of pacing back and forth between the exploration, where your camera was a little more fluid and you could think things through and remember.
You could almost say that because of the Z targeting, and the combat became a smaller element to a greater room's overall conundrum, that it's almost like immersion within immersion, because you're still consciously aware of the fact that you have to solve this puzzle, you have to get out of this room, but because you're focused on the fight, it takes you even further into into the experience.
I would like to say I think that they didn't have a lot of very good excuse for the number of clams they put in the water temple, but
They didn't have a very good excuse for the water temple.
Hey, why does everyone like?
Oh,
that
I was trying. That was a pandering joke.
Come on,
okay, if you want to be honest, I like the water temple. The forest temple that I took like hours trying to get through.
Okay, that I will agree with. The forest temple, I regrettably missed something, and that's actually something I really liked about the game. I missed something. I couldn't figure it out. So you know what? I left. I went out, I got a bunch more heart tokens, I got the blue Zora suit way earlier than scheduled, and yada yada, and I came back as like, okay, take another stab. Here's the button I missed. Okay. So, it wasn't an open world game, yet I could still do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like someone was in there dying that I was on any kind of timetable to rescue.
It didn't matter when you got there, you couldn't rescue the person.
Yeah, that also was another weird thing I thought. You ever play World Ends With You?
That was for the DS. That is one that I do want to play.
Yeah, that was a bit of a weird one in terms of immersion, because at the very beginning, you have written on your hand, you have this many hours to live, which basically equals 7 days. And heck, they even make you skip ahead in time. But that count on your hand never actually did anything. Like, it would go down in terms of the plot, and you'd have like, oh, you have this long to solve something, but you never did. Like, I even remember one time, you have, only 2 minutes to solve this whatever things, like... But you don't. You've got however much time you want, and you always arrive at your location at the exact right time. Like, if you're going to use a timer, either commit to it or make it vague. Like, don't have it counting down all the hours. Say, you have 7 days to live, and thus it's more vague, and it gives you, the player, more freedom to take things at your own pace, because you're already taking things at your own pace.
Yeah. That makes me think of the tear system in Bioshock Infinite, because Elizabeth had the ability to open up tears into other realities to pull something in, but she never seemed to pull something in when you needed something to be pulled in. And where do we start? Where do we stop with the polling system? Well, why couldn't you just pull us all the way to the end and get on with this? Why couldn't you just open up a tear to Paris and just leave?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the worlds you look into seem really nice, and hell, they're not Columbia. I understand that a lot of them have the tears themselves are unstable, but unless the world she's opening a tear to is also unstable, why not just go through the unstable door and let the door collapse behind you?
Yeah, just look through and be like, do you see any neo-Nazis? Nope. Alright, I think this'll do.
They even had, I think, a poster or something for one of the Star Wars movies in one of the
Revenge of the Jedi, which is what Return of the Jedi was going to be called originally before they decided, well, Jedi don't really get revenge. They just kind of try to balance things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was definitely an amazing nod they did there. And I think, there's Bioshock Infinite. Like, it's obeyed... You're a bigger expert than I am because, I've done some of it and you've actually played it through several times. But it was something that at least committed to its own lore. It's kept to its own rules, even if the rules were you can only carry as many guns as you have eyeballs. I can shove a pistol into my pants and save my back for...
They changed that in the DLC.
Like, does it actually change the main game, or... Oh, so it's only the under the water section.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Alright, so I think we should look at how exactly do you do this correctly. Again, you obey your own rules. You actually put some effort into your writing. I mean, it is possible to write characters you like. We were doing this before we had voice and full facial acting, so why is it so hard now that you have more tools? I think I kind of just answered my own question there. But, commit to what you're doing, for starters. I find a lot of, especially like stoner comedy movies, will make a joke and then sort of just kind of make a comment that kind of winks to the camera.
Who would want to watch this movie?
Yeah, it's a level non-committal where we make a joke that some people may not like, or we make a character that some people may not like, but then we sand it down so, the people who don't like it get a piece too. We like it, tasteless people.
Okay.
And
is that it?
Yeah, just make characters, if there's a level of consistency, it works. Bayonetta is in fact a game I like pulling out as a very immersive game. The whole thing is just ridiculous. It's over the top. It's all that silliness, but it commits to that over the topness. Every moment in it is done completely earnestly, like tongue in cheek, actually winking at the camera. Like there's even one point where you're doing this whole dance, you run away, you land, you pose, and there's this shutter flash for no one's actually taking The game is a ton of substance. It also has a ton of substance, ton of style, and it commits to its message. So even though it's so ridiculously over the top, it's consistent in its over the topness.
Yeah. All right. Well, one of the things that I think is important about immersion is the difference between what the game is telling you versus what the players are telling you. And that's more in the multiplayer realm than it is in the single player realm. In the single player realm, you can immerse yourself in it as much as you see fit, because no one is telling you what to or what not to do, unless there are a sociopathic narrator. But that's beside the point. And I want to use the MOBAs as an example of this. And I noticed that Total Biscuit says that he doesn't like that term MOBA. He prefers Dota-style games. I may adopt that. No promises yet.
Well, let's go through. Dota style is Defense of the Ancient style. MOBA is multiplayer online.
Well, that's because Dota is a multiplayer online battle arena, sort of.
I didn't really find their battle arenas because they have they've got a lot of managing going on. If you had
anyone who cares about Dota will tell you that Dota isn't an arena game; it's a strategy game.
Yeah.
But because Dota was one of the inspirations for this whole phenomenon, it's kind of included in the MOBA genre.
Well, Bloodline Champions
three lanes,
is a MOBA.
Heroes facing off each other, minions fighting each other. There's too many things in common. Dota gets called a MOBA. That's just the end of it. But the thing that I wanted to say about it is Valve has taken a lot of measures to try to make this game feel like it's a presentable story. And it's not much of one. It's just these two warring factions attacking each other, and these heroes seeking glory and personal advantages or whatever, joining each side. So that's all great. But where the game breaks immersion almost completely is as soon as other players are telling you what to do, which happens almost right away. Players
we need wards. We need wards.
Yeah, you, in spite of the fact that your hero in particular is a murdering psychopath, is going to be the one buying the wards for us and keeping track on the enemy heroes and smoking of deceiving oneself to go gank other people. You don't get to do the thing that your character intends to do. So your character is like, well, when do we get to go blow something up? Well, never, because we've deferred the farm to somebody else. So you've no longer become connected with your character or your avatar. And although a match is only an hour, because you play these characters over and over again, you will eventually grow some attachment to some of these characters, present company excluded. And then another thing, too, is that there are times where a game mechanic will be deliberately reality-breaking in order to improve the gameplay in a way that doesn't make sense. And there's a very specific example of this, which is creep polling, and you have to be a Dota person to know this. And it's something that I've objected to for a long time. The only reason why we do it nowadays is because there's no getting rid of it. You might as well do it.
It's a classic thing. It's kind of like in Twisted Metal, where you reverse the car by tapping the brake twice.
Yeah.
Because that's totally how it works.
So let's say that there is a group of monsters in a neutral area, and the original idea was if you wanted to spend some time alone and just get experience without having to go near enemy heroes, hoping that they don't sneak up on you, you can do this. But what somebody noticed was that at the minute mark, it's going to check to see if this minion is still here. And if they're not here, by the way, minion is a League of Legends term. It's a hard habit to break. But if they're not there, it thinks, oh, well, they're gone. They probably were killed, so let's respawn. But that's not what happens. What happens is they've actually been pulled or aggroed out of the camp. The new group spawns, the other group comes back, and now the group is stacked. The spawning makes sense only when you assume that the other neutrals are dead. And eventually the jungle has been left alone, and so new monsters have moved in and are going to spend time here now. So in that reality it works. What doesn't work is when these creatures come out of nowhere and another group comes in and well, I guess you're moving in.
Yeah, this seems like a fine new place to move in. We're just going to get rid of all the bodies and hope that no heroes decide to come back and check if there's new monsters here. Now,
sorry, I just want to make this point because it's important, but pulling a stunt like this to appease your players who want this to be part of the game is disrespectful to your game. because this is the kind of thing that a player would have no idea they're supposed to do that until either somebody tells them or the loading screen message has to tell them, which is a random chance.
It's also an aspect of, well, your heroes would have no idea how to do it, but they've even admitted that this was a bug in the first game, and Valve made it a mechanic in the next game out of Faithful. There's a couple of things that specifically are mechanics from the first game that were kept for the second, and most of which I agree. One of which is you can blink or force staff yourself onto a ward point. Okay, that's just a tall cliff. So the idea, why can't I blink or force staff myself on a tall cliff?
Yeah.
That should be perfectly fine. But, so that is okay. The chain lightning breaking Lincoln Sphere is a bit annoying, but it also does give you a tactical way to deal with Lincoln Sphere heavy people.
Well, then the other player has to think, well, he's got chain lightning, so Lincoln Sphere is less effective. Maybe I shouldn't get it.
Yeah, or maybe if I should just stay out of their sight and then engage them through some unconventional ways. But Dota, despite the creep pulling thing, I think Dota 2 is actually a fantastic example of both Zen and story immersion. I mean, obviously it's a multiplayer focused thing, so story immersion is limited, but it still exists. If I go in, Crystal Maiden and Sven were a very popular lane combination in the first game. And the second game, if they go together, Crystal Maiden actually Sven, why are you so blue? They actually have lines for each other. If you keep Crystal Maiden and Tusk in a lane long enough, they actually start making kissy noises because the extended lore basically put them in a relationship between Dota 1 and Dota 2.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of... They'll even have comments to each other. Leshrac and Centaur Warlord have comment responses for each other because, again, that was a popular lane composition. People acknowledge... If I am playing Visage and I kill Invoker, he'll actually Invoker, the Underscape has long since desired to meet a soul such as yours. The heroes in that game acknowledge each other.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, any given match, there is a very good chance one of your heroes has a line for another one, and in some cases you've got 2 or 3 that are doing that.
Yeah, and if anything, I want to see more of that banter.
Yeah.
Because, when they added more lines in Team Fortress 2, and it adds more of a sense of fun to the fights when may I borrow your earpiece? This is Scout! Rainbows make me cry! And a Tidehunter in Dota has every response designed around his hatred of Kunkka. Lurna, you should be putting your... I can't do a Tidehunter, but you should be putting your fire towards something useful, like burning Kunkka's ships.
In Kunkka's the exact same way. He'll kill people Slaughter, you weren't quite a threat like Tidehunter. And it's hilarious because there's one line Kunkka has, kill Tidehunter, you hated me more than anyone else. You can't buy that kind of love. And, Lena and Crystal Maiden are sisters, and they hate each other.
Yeah.
What's another couple of fun examples? Invoker and Rubric. Rubric has a bunch of lines for people, but, he'll meet Invoker's Invoker now? Not Ancestral Magus? So, hey, Rubric is somebody who knew Invoker back when he wasn't as invokey, when he was entirely different style. And
Visage knows Razor. It's Razor, what the hell are you doing here? Who's got it in the maze?
And Razor has no response for some reason, but yeah,
that's the thing I'd like to see is that the characters actually start having conversations.
Yeah, Legion Commander has the most number of lines because of her duel. If she duels anyone with facial hair, she'll actually say, "Defend your beard! Defend your mustache!
Yeah.
You, stop flying! Your bow can't save you anymore!" She has a ton of lines like that, and she'll even, if you're in same lane as Tusk, let's take a look at Legion Commander or Tusk. Legion Commander, a big fighter, she, uses her physical strength, she thinks a lot, she just... she's a combatant. You have Tusk. He's essentially a ball brawler and wilderness survivaler in a fantasy world. I mean, if you go to a bar in a fantasy world and you can beat everybody up, you just beat up? You beat up adventurers, you beat up guardsmen, you beat up mercenaries, and maybe 1 or 2 actual drunks who probably just go there and spend their money. So, I mean, if he can... And if they're in lane, she'll actually say, Tusk, or she probably even calls it Ymir, a fight is much like a brawl. She actually tries to impart some wisdom on him, and that adds to life so much. And I think one of the best things is you play as Jakiro, you kill Bat Rider, and because Jakiro's a 2-headed dragon, it's the skies are for dragons, learn to walk! And like, that adds a lot of life to the game. That adds a lot of fun. These heroes know each other. They recognize. They even talk to each other, and they'll make comments. You buy Battle Fury at Juggernaut's like, Battle Fury, meet Blade Fury, and all these other fun things. And so that actually is a perfect example of both kinds of immersion, but yes, it is kind of broken the moment you introduce another human being, because spontaneously they're putting a level of meta on something that could otherwise be, and still is in many ways, a very absorbing experience.
Mm-hmm. I, for one, think that's a good place to stop.
Well, I actually have one final point for this immersion episode that I think is the most important, and I direct this at Valve primarily, because if anyone can fix this easily, it will be Valve. So again, like, all the pressure's on you. I'd also like to direct this at Sony, because
Valve totally doesn't have pressure to bring out anything, right?
Absolutely not. Techies? Oh no, wait, by the time this comes out, Techies will be here.
Oh, yeah.
It's our dated thing.
These are...
Yeah, because... But anyways, Valve, you have the best chance of fixing this.
50-50. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't know what Valve time is. Anyway, concentrating. Valve, you have the best chance to fix this, so I'm aiming this primarily at you. I would also like to aim this at Sony, because I like to defend Sony. I think that...
Well, someone has to.
Yeah, they're not as bad as the last person on the counter. Microsoft, go fuck yourself. But anyways, they're not going to fix this. Stop it with the achievement obsession. The fact that, again, I'm playing a game like Dishonored, I'm sucked into the world, I do a scripted event, and oh, childcare, you rescued what's-her-name. It's like, I'm in a game, playing the game. Like, when I play stuff like Dishonored and Dead Space and those games, I switch myself to appear offline, because I don't want people messaging me. And then the idea that I do this, and here's this little achievement for getting it. I kid you not, I was playing Guild Wars on the PC, first one, because the other one came out, and I beat a boss, and while the cutscene's happening, achievement unlocked, you beat this boss on normal. Achievement unlocked, you beat this boss on easy. Achievement unlocked, you beat this boss in general. Achievement unlocked, you're halfway through the game. I'm not making this up. This like obviously, like, the spacing was a bit more than what I just did with my hand, but it really, like I want a way to just, if you want to just spam me with achievements, fine. I don't want to see them.
You haven't... Is there no way to turn them off when they appear?
Not that I'm aware.
Because I feel like this problem might already be solved.
I know at the moment you can close the Steam overlay, but that doesn't mean it stops existing. It still gives you messages and stuff. Like, closing the Steam overlay is actually just the shift tab thing. But as far as I'm aware, I can't make it just not... I think the only time achievements have... There's two examples of achievements actually being, like, really good, in my opinion. Okay. 2.5. The half of achievement is, in the beginning, Team Fortress 2, the achievements taught you how to do things. Reflect a critical rocket as a pyro and kill the person who fired it. Now I know I can do that. But the examples would be Stanley Parable, because one achievement is literally you go into the options menu. It's like achievement, on or off. If you turn it on, you get the achievement. You turn it off, you lose the achievement. And the other example would be Portal 2. Now, major spoiler, we're pretty much done the episode, so if you don't want this Portal 2 spoiler, just stop the episode now. There's the one part where he tries to kill you. Where Wesley tries to kill you. And you literally jump on a pad, and GLaDOS says, oh, this is the part where he tries to kill you. You land on it, and, here's really, this is the part where I try to kill you. Achievement unlocked. This is the part where he tries to kill you. Chapter 6. This is the part where he kills you. Like, that was hilarious. But it's a matter, again, like, in general, I'm going to say 99.99999% of the time, achievements are just, they're breaking the immersion. They're hurting things. They're making it harder. So, like... If you insist on loading down our supposed invisible gamer dicks with these achievement points, could you at least make it happen in the background? I'm trying to play an immersive game here.
We game because we want to be immersed.
I cried when Eridith died.
Did you actually cry when Eridith died?
It was many years ago, I don't remember.
Okay. Moment of silence for Aerith. Split second of silence for Windows Live. And we're done.